Have you ever wondered why a man's charm can turn into coldness the moment you stop needing him? It's not a coincidence. It's not your fault. And it's not love. What you've triggered is something far more dangerous, something buried in the unconscious mind of nearly every man who has not faced himself: the shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden half of the psyche, the unlived life, the denied fears, the repressed instincts, the secret desires and shameful rage locked behind the polite smile. And when a woman shows up in her full presence, aware, grounded, unapologetic, she doesn't just stand before a man. She reaches into him. She touches the places he hides even from himself. This is where the war begins. It might start with attraction, because nothing fascinates the fragmented masculine more than a woman who cannot be controlled. He'll pursue you with fire in his eyes and conviction in his voice. He'll say you're different, that he's never met anyone like you. And he's right. Not because you're some fantasy, but because you don't need to be one. You're not performing. You're being. And that's what terrifies him most. He doesn't know it yet, but your wholeness is a threat to his illusion. The moment you stop trying to earn love, the shadow awakens. At first, it will feel like tension in the air. He'll misread your independence as distance, your clarity as arrogance, your boundaries as rejection. It will confuse him, anger him, not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've dared to be the one thing he has never made peace with: whole. In your presence, he sees what he's not, and the ego, which lives in performance and pride, doesn't know how to cope with that. So it fights, but not openly. The shadow is cunning. It won't shout at first, it will whisper, it will plant doubt. He might begin withdrawing affection, offering subtle critiques, asking loaded questions designed to chip away at your self-trust. He may become passive, emotionally unpredictable, or use charm like a blade, cutting and caressing all at once. Why? Because your energy pulled something out of him he cannot unsee. And instead of facing it, he wants to destroy the mirror. That mirror is you. And if you don't understand what's happening, you might internalize the chaos. You might try harder to soothe him, please him, prove him wrong. You might feel guilty for triggering his wounds. But hear this and remember it with your whole being. It is not your job to carry the consequences of a man who refuses to do his inner work. You didn't cause his shadow, you just illuminated it. And what a woman must learn, what no one ever teaches, is that the moment you reflect a man's unconscious back to him, you become dangerous in his eyes. Not because you hurt him, but because you see him. And when a man has spent his whole life surviving by pretending, being seen feels like an attack. He will call you too intense, too emotional, too complicated. But what he really means is, you make me feel something I don't want to feel. You are the silence between his thoughts. You are the softness that disrupts his hard facade. You are the question mark in a life he built on false exclamation points. And the shadow hates being questioned. You may start to notice strange shifts. His mood darkens when you're joyful. He pulls away when you speak your truth. He criticizes the very qualities he once praised. These are signs, not of his truth, but of his fracture. He's not angry at you. He's angry that you don't collapse under the weight of his storm, that you still rise, still glow, still choose yourself. In that moment, you are not just a woman. You are a force, but make no mistake. The more radiant your soul, the more violently the shadow may react. And the question is not, will you trigger it? You already have. The real question is, what will you do when the mask falls? Because once the shadow is awake, everything changes. He may begin to oscillate between warmth and coldness, as if trapped in a psychic tug-of-war. One moment he sees your light and wants to bask in it. The next, he resents you for not needing his approval to shine. This is not love, not in its awakened form. This is a collision between two psyches, yours, sovereign and self-owned, and his, divided against itself. When a man has not integrated his shadow, he is at war within, and anyone who loves him, truly loves him, will eventually become collateral damage unless he chooses to heal. But here is the cruel paradox. It is often the most grounded, intuitive, spiritually aware women who trigger this split. Not because they intend to, but because their presence is truth. And truth always disturbs illusion. He may accuse you of changing, but what he really fears is that you haven't, that you're not adapting to the roles he's used to assigning, that you're not becoming smaller to make room for his fears. And this non-compliance, it unravels him, because it forces him to ask the one question the ego never wants to face. What if I'm not in control anymore? He might begin projecting. Suddenly, you're too masculine for asserting boundaries. You're emotionally unstable for responding to his gaslighting. You're cold for protecting your peace. These labels are not reflections of your truth. They are shields, wielded in desperation by a man unwilling to face his own reflection. The shadow deflects before it accepts. It attacks before it integrates. And yet, some part of him still knows. Deep beneath the denial, beneath the ego, beneath the masks, he knows you're not the enemy. He knows that what he's feeling isn't new. It's ancient. It belongs to the boy who wasn't allowed to cry, to the teenager who had to be tough, to the man who believed worth was earned by domination, not vulnerability. And you, woman of depth, woman of power, have unknowingly brought him to the gates of himself. But not every man is ready to walk through. Some will recoil. Others will run. A few will attempt to control what they cannot understand. Because your refusal to be manipulated is not just personal, it's existential. You are reminding him, in every moment you stay rooted, that there is a version of himself he has not yet met. And that terrifies him. Because meeting that version would mean death to the persona he's clung to his whole life. The charming man, the stoic man, the one who's always fine, the one who never needed help, the one who always gets the girl. All of these masks must fall for the shadow to be met, and the woman who triggers that process becomes, in a way, a spiritual catalyst, a symbol of transformation, but also, in his eyes, a threat to everything familiar. This is the strange grief of being a woman who sees too much. You witness both his greatness and his resistance to it. You see the man he could become, and the child he refuses to stop being. And if you're not careful, you may begin to internalize his refusal as your failure. You may think, if I had just been softer, more patient, less demanding, maybe he wouldn't have turned on me. But that is a lie. It is not your femininity that's the problem. It's that your femininity is whole. You are no longer pretending, performing, or placating. And that wholeness doesn't just disturb a fractured man. It exposes him, not just to you, but to himself. And so, he may try to punish you for what he cannot process. Not with fists, not always with rage, but with absence, with silence, with strange disappearances of affection, with comments meant to cut instead of connect. These are not random acts. They are defense mechanisms, unconscious attempts to reclaim power through confusion. He wants to pull you off your throne not because he hates you, but because he fears you. Fears what you awaken. Fears that if you keep standing tall, he will have to kneel. Not to you, but to his own soul. And that is something the uninitiated, masculine, often cannot bear. But this is not about punishment. It is about pattern. Every man carries an invisible wound, and when the woman before him embodies a love that reflects both light and shadow, that wound begins to ache. He can choose to numb it, deny it, run from it, or he can rise to meet it. But only he can choose that. And no amount of softness or sacrifice from you will make that choice for him. So ask yourself, do I want to be the mirror, or do I want to be the muse? Because the mirror will be feared, but it will also be respected, revered, remembered. The muse is adored, but she is also forgotten the moment she stops pleasing. You are not here to soothe the shadow. You are here to awaken the soul. There will come a moment, inevitable, sacred, and sharp, when the man you've triggered must decide whether to evolve or retreat. That moment is not loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or confessions. It arrives in silence, in a pause between texts, in the flicker of doubt behind his eyes, in the way he looks at you and sees too much, feels too much, and doesn't know whether to move closer or run. This is the threshold. To cross it would mean facing everything he's buried: the shame, the grief, the insecurity, the lies he's told himself just to survive. The illusion of control would have to die. The child who sought validation would have to surrender, and the shadow would have to become part of him. Few do it, because most men were raised not to feel, but to function, not to connect, but to conquer, not to be held, but to hold it all in until the pain becomes so normalized it passes for personality. And when a woman walks in, intuitive, aware, alive, she doesn't just challenge the mask. She threatens to make it irrelevant. You didn't ask for that power, but you have it. And now you're here, watching him waver between denial and desire, between his highest self and his lowest impulses. He may love you, deeply even, but if he has not chosen to love himself with the same depth, your presence will burn. Because love, real love, is not a bomb for the ego. It is a fire. It purifies. It demands. And what you are offering, simply by existing in your embodied truth, is the opportunity to become whole, not by healing him, but by refusing to abandon yourself in the process of watching him unravel. You are the sacred test. The moment he cannot manipulate your emotions, he must meet his own. The moment he cannot seduce you into silence, he must confront his voice. The moment he cannot control your presence, he must ask who he is without control at all. And in that reckoning, one of two things happens. He rises, or he rages. Sometimes both, because the journey from ego to essence is not linear. It is messy, emotional, destructive. The man who chooses growth may still hurt you along the way, not because he wants to, but because he is purging lifetimes of pain. You must decide then, do I stay to witness this purge, or do I walk away to protect my own peace? There is no right answer. There is only the truth. Staying with a man in the middle of shadow work is not romance. It is spiritual warfare, and your soul must be armed with discernment, self-love, and the unwavering courage to leave, even when love is present, but growth is not. Because love without growth becomes stagnation, and stagnation becomes suffering. You are not here to be a man's emotional dump site. You are not his unpaid therapist. You are not his savior. You are the sun, and if he chooses to keep his eyes closed in your light, that is not your burden. You must learn to recognize the difference between a man who is challenged by your truth and chooses to rise, and a man who is threatened by your truth and chooses to punish. One will walk toward the fire to transform. The other will throw water on your flame and call you dangerous, and in that moment you'll feel it. The choice, the pull, the temptation to soften, to dim, to bend, just slightly so he feels safer. But remember, safety is not built on sacrifice. It's built on sovereignty. If you shrink now, you will teach him that the shadow is more powerful than the soul, that chaos deserves more loyalty than clarity. Do not teach him that. Hold your posture. Hold your peace. Hold the sacred knowing that you are not here to be understood by someone who refuses to understand himself. If your presence triggers his wounds, That is not a sign to disappear. That is a sign to decide. Is this a man willing to meet himself? Or is this a man trying to drag me into the pit he refuses to leave? You cannot do his descent for him, but you can do yours. And if you've ever known the taste of betrayal, the sting of projection, the heartbreak of loving someone not yet ready to rise, then you already know how dangerous a man's shadow can be when it's left unchecked. You've felt the confusion, the spiritual disorientation of being loved and punished in the same breath, the craving for closure from someone who never gave you clarity, the ache of becoming someone's emotional battleground when all you wanted was a place to meet in truth. But what you must never forget is this: you were not chosen because you are weak. You were chosen by the unconscious because you are strong. The shadow does not rise for the unworthy. It rises for the ones who threaten the illusion. You did not break him. You simply stopped being breakable. And that refusal to be breakable, is what both ignites him and undoes him. He will think of you long after you've gone, long after the power plays have ended, long after the silence has hardened into absence. Not because he misses what you gave him, but because he feels what you represented. You were not just a woman to him. You were a door, a threshold, a divine provocation. And that is not easily forgotten. But let's not romanticize the pain. Because what happens when you trigger a man's shadow is rarely poetic in the moment. It is confusion dressed in charm. It is manipulation camouflaged as passion. It is contradiction after contradiction. One moment you're his mirror, the next his monster. One day his muse, the next his enemy. He is not evil. He is simply unequipped. And that's the danger. Because an unequipped man still has power. Power to project. Power to distort. Power to make you question the very instincts that were sent to protect you. And if you are not grounded in your own worth, you will start to believe the lie that you were too much, that you were too wild, too emotional, too untamable. But what you really were was accurate. You were the unfiltered reflection of his unloved self, the living embodiment of every emotion he has ever silenced. You were passion that didn't need permission. You were depth that didn't wait for validation. And so he resented you, not because you wounded him, but because you made him feel. And feeling to the unintegrated masculine is synonymous with weakness. So he tries to win instead. He turns intimacy into a battlefield, conversations into control, and vulnerability into a transaction. He withholds affection to punish. He offers crumbs to confuse. He flirts with other women not because he desires them, but because he hopes you'll feel small again, contained, manageable. But you won't, because once a woman has seen the pattern, she cannot unsee it. And once you've identified the game, you stop playing. That is your liberation, not walking away in bitterness, but walking away in truth. Not punishing him for what he couldn't be, but refusing to pay the price for what he never chose to become. The woman who triggers a man's shadow must also be willing to stand alone in the aftermath, because after the storm, the silence will be deafening. The questions will echo. Was it real? Did I ask for too much? Did I imagine the darkness? But in time, the silence will clarify. You will remember that love is not meant to make you question your worth. That desire is not meant to disguise harm. That connection without emotional safety is not connection. It's trauma reenactment. He wanted the version of you that didn't exist anymore, the one who needed male approval to feel whole. But that version has died, and the shadow knows it. So what happens when you trigger a man's shadow? He may disappear, he may lash out, he may spiral into other women, other highs, other ways to distract himself from the work he still refuses to do. But his soul will remember, because you didn't just remind him of what he lacked, you reminded him of what he could become. if he ever chooses the path of individuation, if he ever dares to face the monster in the mirror, if he ever decides to stop being a man the world molded and start becoming a man his soul respects. It will begin with you, with the moment he couldn't control you, with the night your silence screamed louder than your words, with the heartbreak that didn't make you beg, but made you rise. That is your legacy. And let this be known: the shadow is not destroyed. It is integrated, but not by you. Never by you. You are the spark, not the fire. You are the reflection, not the transformation. And any man who places the weight of his healing on your shoulders was never strong enough to carry you anyway. Release the guilt. Release the need to be understood. Release the idea that your power must be softened to be loved. Because the man who cannot meet your depth is not meant to anchor you. He is meant to show you where your own strength begins. You were never meant to be his mirror forever. You were meant to move on. And when you do move on, when your feet step into the sacred silence that follows the storm, you begin to hear something you couldn't before. Not his voice, not the echo of the past, but your own soul speaking clearly again, whispering what it always knew, that your worth is not determined by his awakening, that your power is not dependent on his recognition, that your love is not lesser just because it was unreceived. This is where true liberation begins, because you no longer crave the apology. You no longer chase the closure. You no longer wait for the shadow to transform into the man you hoped he'd become. You understand now, that was never your battle. Your battlefield was within, and you've won. Not because he changed, but because you stopped needing him to. You rise not by being loved, but by loving yourself in the moments you were most misunderstood. There will be others. Men who are not afraid of the mirror. Men who have done their descent and returned whole. Men who will not see your clarity as confrontation, but as invitation. Who will not shrink in your fire, but sit beside it and match your warmth with presence. And when they arrive, you will know them not by their promises, but by their silence, how safe it feels, how it doesn't demand, how it doesn't compete, how it doesn't need to own you to be near you. But, until then, walk in your knowing. You have met the shadow. You have seen what it does when provoked. You have felt the way it twists love into confusion, affection into control, passion into projection. You know now that being chosen is not the same as being cherished. That being desired is not the same as being respected. That being mirrored is not the same as being met. And that is a sacred knowing. Because the woman who can stand in the face of unconscious masculinity and not flinch becomes something untouchable. Not cold, not hard, but sovereign. No longer addicted to the potential in others. No longer seduced by broken promises. No longer willing to bleed for a man too afraid to look at his own wounds. She walks differently now. Not to escape the past, but because she has reclaimed her future. And in that future, her energy is currency. Her peace is non-negotiable. Her love is no longer poured into unfinished people hoping to be filled. It is poured into purpose, into truth, into herself. And something miraculous happens then. The same shadow that once tried to destroy her becomes the backdrop against which her light shines brighter than ever. Not because the shadow is gone, but because it no longer controls the frame. It no longer dictates the story. She is no longer reactive to it. She is aware of it. That awareness, that is power. She does not fight to be seen. She sees herself. She does not beg to be heard. She listens to her own soul. She does not chase a man who isn't ready. She walks away in silence and lets her absence speak in volumes. Because she understands now, not all connections are meant to be completed. Some are meant to awaken. Some are meant to disrupt. Some are meant to destroy the parts of us still willing to settle for fragments. You were not meant to carry his healing. You were meant to remember your own wholeness, and that is the most powerful thing a woman can ever do. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.